Hello and welcome to my Discourse 200 final webinar titled Harry Potter and the Lord of the Star Wars. I hope you enjoy. Tell me if this sounds familiar. A young boy who longs for adventure discovers that he is in possession of magical powers, and with the help of an old bearded master and two friends, he goes on a journey to save the world. Along the way, the powers become stronger and the boy loses his mentor. After nearly dying, the boy saves the day and returns to live happily ever after. This should sound familiar. It is a very summarized version of Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and Star Wars. The atmosphere and the heroes are very different, but the story hits all the same beats. Why is this? We have Joseph Campbell to thank for an answer. He created what is known as the hero's journey, and he wrote a whole book on it called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. The purpose of this book was to uncover some of the truths disguised for us under the figures of religion and mythology, by bringing together a multitude of not too difficult examples and letting the ancient meaning become apparent in itself. As Christopher Vogler, a Hollywood screenwriter and author of the article Joseph Campbell Goes to the Movies, The Influence of the Hero's Journey in Film Narrative puts it, Campbell is resurrecting the ancient story patterns and offering them up as a guide for navigating the modern world. Still true, still reliable, the knowledge encoded in these patterns and symbols could bring meaning and purpose to life, even in our fast-changing, unsettling times. I will be referring to Campbell's book as I compare the hero's journeys of Harry, Frodo, and Luke, and discover how they fit into this cycle of heroism, and why they have stayed with us after all this time. The first section of the hero's journey is the departure, where the hero ventures from the known world into the unknown. We get to know our hero here and become invested in the journey that is to come. The first stage of the hero's journey is the call to adventure, or the inciting incident. Something happens to the hero, or he receives something that sets the journey in motion. From Campbell, a blunder, apparently the merest chance, reveals an unsuspected world, and the individual is drawn into relationship with the forces that are not rightly understood. Harry's call is him receiving his letter to Hogwarts. It is the confirmation that something is special about Harry, and it sets him off on his journey. Frodo's call is when he receives the ring from Bilbo. He knows a bit about the ring, but he does not know the power it holds. Luke's call is when he discovers Leia's message in R2-D2. The message is asking for Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Luke, suspecting that Obi-Wan is old Ben Kenobi, sets off to find him. However brief, each hero feels the responsibility to stay in the world he knows. Campbell says about this stage, the refusal of the call, is that it's a refusal to give up what one takes to be one's own interest. Harry's Uncle Vernon tries to hide Harry away from letters, doing the refusal of the call for Harry. Frodo tries to hand off the ring, once to Gandalf, and then again at the Council of Elrond. Luke feels like he is obligated to stay on Tatooine with his aunt and uncle, and that he shouldn't try to find Leia with Ben Kenobi. As each hero sets off on their quest, they receive something or meet someone who has special wisdom and powers to help guide the hero along. The first encounter of the hero journey is with a protective figure, often a little old crone or an old man, who provides the adventure with the amulets against the dragon forces he is about to pass. Harry meets Hagrid, Dumbledore, and Ollivander, who represent the unknown powers of the magical world, and Harry receives his wand. Harry also gets his invisibility cloak from Dumbledore, who got it from Harry's father. Frodo's supernatural aid comes in the form of Gandalf, the Ring, and Sting. Gandalf provides protecting magic, and the Ring and Sting are otherworldly devices that protect Frodo on his journey. Luke's supernatural aid is Ben Kenobi, his lightsaber, and the Force. Ben teaches Luke how to use the Force, and Luke has his lightsaber and the Force as a constant throughout his journey, when he learns how to use them. Each hero begins his journey by crossing a threshold. The first threshold represents the point of no return for the hero. The entrance to the zone of magnified power. Beyond them is darkness, the unknown, and danger. Harry's threshold is platform 9 3/4, where he officially leaves the Muggle world into the magical one. There is also the crossing of the lake to get into Hogwarts, which represents Harry finally coming home. Frodo's threshold is simple. It's when he leaves Rivendell with the Fellowship. He is leaving the comfort of his friends and family behind and entering the strange new world away from the Shire. Luke's threshold is twofold. First, when he leaves Tatooine for the first time in his life. Then, in the larger scheme of his hero's journey when he blows up the Death Star, cementing himself as a Jedi and as a bigger part of the Rebel Alliance. Once the hero has crossed the threshold, he enters into a world he does not understand, or the belly of the whale. The hero, instead of conquering or conciliating the power of the threshold, is swallowed into the unknown and would appear to have died. This is when the hero learns that he may have bitten off more than he can chew in this strange new world. For Harry, this moment is when he enters Diagon Alley and learns that there is a whole world that he had no clue about. For Frodo, the belly of the whale is the mines of Moria, where not only do the Fellowship discover the evil that has been happening in Middle-earth under their noses, but they also lose their supernatural aide, Gandalf. For Luke, the belly of the whale is the cantina on Tatooine, where Luke is introduced to the scum and villainy that lives outside of the bubble that was Luke's moisture farm. This could also be when Luke enters Dagobah looking for Yoda, because Luke is about to discover the deeper influences of the Force. Part of the belly of the whale is dismemberment. The hero loses a limb, is scarred, or dies. His body parts might become scattered. The physical body of the hero may actually be slain, dismembered, and scattered over land and sea. Whatever the case, the hero must undergo some sort of physical trauma in order to accept his role on his journey. Harry dies in order to destroy the Horcrux in him. Frodo loses a finger to Gollum after Frodo refuses to destroy the ring, and Luke loses a hand in his first confrontation with Vader. Both Frodo and Luke's dismemberment comes with a loss of ego, where they were confident in themselves and they pay the price for it. The second section of the hero's journey is the initiation, where the hero is now in the unknown and must prove himself through many trials, as demonstrated in the Road of Trials. The hero's journey isn't easy, but if it was, it wouldn't be interesting. The hero now must overcome a series of obstacles that will destroy who the hero is and make him anew, for better or for worse. The fun part is that the hero has no clue what he's doing. Campbell says about this stage that once having traversed the threshold, the hero moves in a dream landscape of curiously fluid, ambiguous forms, where he must survive a succession of trials. Harry's Road of Trials is his time at Hogwarts, where he must learn how to use magic. He uses these skills in order to fight Voldemort in a series of mini-boss battles before he fights Voldemort at full power. Frodo's Road of Trials comes in the form of his journey with Sam and Gollum. This Frodo must get through physically and mentally, as the ring begins to weigh him down and Gollum and Sauron begin to get into his head. Luke's Road of Trials is his training to be a Jedi. He realizes that it is much harder than it seemed to him, and he must overcome his own doubts to become prolific in the Force. One of the main things each of these heroes must endure is the destruction of ego. They must overcome their pride and it failed at least once to become who they were meant to be, which we'll see in the Apotheosis stage. Each hero meets a goddess figure who helps them or hurts them on their journey. According to Campbell, the goddess is both mothering and powerful. She also has a good side and an evil side, like an evil stepmother archetype. For she is the incarnation of the promise of perfection, the soul's assurance that, at the conclusion of its exile in a world of organized inadequacies, the bliss that was once known will be known again. The comforting, nourishing, the good mother, young and beautiful, who was known to us and even tasted in the remotest past. Time sealed her away, yet she is dwelling still, like one who sleeps in timelessness at the bottom of a timeless deep. Lily Potter is Harry's goddess. She is truly the mothering aspect in that she is Harry's mother, and she gives her life for Harry. By doing this, she casts a protective spell on Harry so that he cannot be touched by Voldemort. Lily inspires Harry throughout his entire journey, being the pure good Harry can remember to lead him through his road of trials. Galadriel is the good and bad sides of the goddess, where she is organic and mothering as well as powerful and deadly. She is absolutely beautiful and serves as inspiration for Frodo on his journey. Her gifts save the Fellowship as a whole, making her supernatural aid as well as the goddess. Leia is the more obvious choice for Luke's goddess. She's smart, pretty, and strong, helping in her own escape from the Death Star. She also serves as guidance for Luke, especially when they discover that they are brother and sister. But I would also argue that the Force is Luke's goddess. It is a feminine life force, and it protects Luke and lets him help himself and others. It is a guidance through Luke's journey, and he learns to rely on it. The opposite of the goddess is the woman as temptress. She is the embodiment of what the hero must overcome in order to fulfill his journey. She tries to tempt the hero off his path. Campbell says that the hero turns from the fair features of the world to search the darkness for a higher kingdom than this. The seeker of life beyond life must press beyond her, surpass the temptations of her call, and soar to the immaculate ether beyond. Harry's temptation is twofold. The first comes with the Mirror of Erised, which shows the viewer his deepest, most desperate desire. All Harry wants is his family, which is what he sees in the mirror. The desire is seen throughout all of Harry's journey, where he just wants to be normal. This temptation of normalcy is also seen through Ginny, who becomes Harry's girlfriend in book and movie 6. Harry has to leave Jenny, the representation of just settling down and forgetting his troubles in order to hunt Horcruxes. Frodo's temptation is pretty obvious, the ring. He wants to just give in and keep it to himself, or give the burden to someone else. Galadriel also serves as temptation for him when he offers her the ring. His mind is quickly changed, however, when she shows him the dark power that would come with Galadriel wielding the ring. Ultimately, Frodo gives in to the temptation of the ring and takes it for himself. Luke's temptation comes in the form of the dark side of the Force, the opposite of his goddess. It is constantly calling to him, wanting to give in to emotions. Luke initially overcomes this temptation, refusing to kill Vader in Episode 6, but gives in to it for a brief moment in Episode 8 when he tries to kill Ben Solo, creating Kylo Ren in the process. Now I want to talk about my favorite stage of the hero's journey, the Atonement of the Father. Campbell rambles on about this for a while, but I picked out some quotes that I think describe it best for our heroes. The problem of the hero going to meet the Father is to open his soul beyond terror to such a degree that he will be ripe to understand how the sickening and insane tragedies of this vast and ruthless cosmos are completely validated in the majesty of being. The hero transcends life with its peculiar blind spot and for a moment rises to a glimpse of the source. He beholds the face of the Father, understands, and the two are atoned. When the child outgrows the popular ideal of the mother breast and turns to face the world of specialized adult action, it passes spiritually into the sphere of the Father, who becomes, for his son, the sign of a future task. Whether he knows it or not, and no matter what his position in society, the Father is the initiating priest through whom the young being passes on into the larger world. There is a rivalry between father and the son, with the son trying to become like his father or separating himself from his father. Usually the father is part of the beginning of the hero's destruction of ego, and the hero must come to terms with his father in one way or another. He either destroys his father or becomes him. Harry must come to terms with the fact that he is a Horcrux of Voldemort's, and that Voldemort has been an initiator in Harry's entire life. Voldemort has been a constant in Harry's life, and is the father in the way that Harry realizes that his entire life has been meant to die to defeat Voldemort, and the only way for Voldemort to be defeated is for Harry to sacrifice himself. Harry uses the Resurrection Stone before he goes to die to meet with all of the dead father figures in his life, and they give him courage. Harry wants to become like his biological father, who died for his loved ones to live. Frodo does not really have a father figure to atone with. The closest he has is Bilbo and Sauron. By the end of Frodo's hero's journey, Frodo understands the power of the ring and how it took over Bilbo. He also understands why Bilbo was so protective of it. Frodo also ultimately understands why the ring must be destroyed. But when he gets to Mount Doom, he takes the ring for himself. He has become like Sauron, greedy and power-hungry, and gives in to the temptation of the ring. The beginning of Luke's atonement is when he must come to grips with the fact that Vader is his father. After that, he truly believes that he can bring Vader back to the light side of the Force. He holds fast to this until the Emperor tricks Luke into giving into hatred and fighting Vader. It's only after Luke has Vader at his mercy and cuts off Vader's hand that he realizes what he is becoming. He then tosses his lightsaber away and refuses to become like his father. The hero eventually reaches a moment where he is the ultimate version of himself, the divine state to which a human hero attains who has gone beyond the last terrors of ignorance. When the envelopment of consciousness has been annihilated, then he becomes free of all fear, beyond the reach of change. The hero becomes almost godlike in his abilities, and has reached the peak of his abilities. He no longer fears for himself or his life. For Harry, this is when he claims his role as the master of the Deathly Hallows, having used the Resurrection Stone, the Invisibility Cloak, and the Elder Wand. He has reached the peak of his wizarding abilities. Frodo's apotheosis, in one of the greatest twists in modern literature, is when he fails to destroy the ring and claims it as his own, saying outright, "I do not choose now to do what I came to do. I will not do this deed. The ring is mine," and vanishes out of sight. He is no longer afraid of death, or of Sauron, or Gollum. All he knows is the overwhelming power and temptation of the ring. Luke's apotheosis comes in the sequel trilogy, when he uses Force Projection, a new ability for Force users, to defeat Kylo Ren in Episode 8. He overcomes his fear of returning as a Jedi and embraces the legend of Luke Skywalker, and becomes the ultimate version of himself. The ultimate boon comes from being reborn after the apotheosis. The gods and goddesses then are to be understood as embodiments and custodians of the elixir of imperishable being, but not themselves the ultimate in its primary state. What the hero seeks through his intercourse with them is therefore not finally themselves, but their grace, i.e., the power of their sustaining substance. The hero is given an enlightenment, an object, or a chance to reach the highest achievement yet in his journey. Harry, after destroying the Horcrux in him, is able to go back to life, a decision helped by Dumbledore. Frodo's boon comes in the form of Gollum, who takes the ring back from Frodo and then accidentally happy dances into the lava, destroying himself and the ring. Luke, after using all his energy to distract Kylo Ren by Force projection, passes away and becomes one with the Force. The final stage of the hero's journey is the return. The hero returns to the known world either to set it right or as a victorious warrior. He has overcome himself and is now able to fulfill his destiny. But the hero has a moment where he doesn't want to return to the known world. When the hero quest has been accomplished, the adventurer still must return to his life-transmuted trophy. But the responsibility has frequently been refused. Numerous indeed are the heroes fabled to have taken up the residence forever in the blessed isle of the unaging goddess of immortal being. The hero has reached bliss and doesn't want to return. Harry considers staying dead and leaving his friends to deal with Voldemort, not wanting to leave the peaceful and ethereal King's Cross he finds himself in. Frodo is ready to die at Mount Doom and is glad that he can remember the good in the world that he worked so hard to save. Luke, after trying to kill Kylo Ren, runs away and hides. When Rey shows up with his lightsaber, he tosses it behind him, refusing to go back to the life in which he was a failure, preferring to stay isolated. In order to return to the known world, the hero must run to it or run away from the forces that are keeping him from returning. Often this flight is aided by some sort of magical element. The final stage of the hero's adventure is supported by all the powers of his supernatural patron. If the hero's wish to return to the world has been resented by the gods or demons, then the last stage of the mythological round becomes a lively, often comical pursuit. This fight may be complicated by marvels of magical obstruction and evasion. Harry's magic flight comes when he has returned from the dead, but is pretending to stay dead in order to fool Voldemort. Hagrid carries Harry back to Hogwarts, where Harry is able to defeat Voldemort. Frodo is rescued by the Eagles, who pick him up off of Mount Doom. Luke has a couple of magic fights. During the first Death Star tench run, running away from Vader's TIE fighter, in Episode 5, when he drops through the air shafts into the Falcon after being defeated by Vader for the first time. And then finally in episode 8, when he disappears after fighting Kylo Ren to distract him from the Rebel Alliance. During or after the magical flight, the hero is rescued, either by himself or some outside force. The hero may have to be brought back from his supernatural adventure by assistance from without. That is to say, the world may have to come and get him. Harry's friends, specifically Neville, rally together and begin the fight against Voldemort again. Gandalf rescues Frodo using the Eagles and brings him back to Minas Tirith. Luke again has a couple of rescues. Han shows up at the trench run and clears the way for Luke. In episode 4, Vader kills the Emperor while he is electrocuting Luke in episode 6, and Luke is able to rescue Rey in The Rise of Skywalker when he is finally able to lift a X-Wing out of the water. The hero crosses back into the known world, but first he must decide why. The returning hero, to complete his adventure, must survive the impact of the world. But why re-enter such a world? Why attempt to make plausible or even interesting to men and women consumed with passion the experience of transcendental bliss? Transcendental bliss, fun word. Harry gives up the Elder Wand, deciding that he just wants to be himself instead of the legend of the boy who lived. He gives up legendary status to live a normal life with his friends. Frodo and the hobbits return to the Shire, but they have been through so much the Shire seems alien to them. Luke crosses the return threshold once after the second Death Star is destroyed, and he meets up with his friends at the Ewok party. And then again when he faces Kylo Ren, and when he meets Leia beforehand, coming back to the people he knows and loves. Now the hero has one foot in the known and unknown worlds. Freedom to pass back and forth across the world division, from the perspective of the apparitions of time to that of the casual deep and back, not contaminating the principles of the one with those of the other, yet permitting the mind to know the one by virtue of the other, is the talent of the master. Harry now knows about the Deathly Hallows and how he can control them, but he gives them up to live with his friends instead, outright saying, "I don't want it." Frodo writes about his time on his adventure, but he's been so scarred by it, it's difficult for him to forget the trauma he went through, even though he is back home. Luke is now one with the Force, but he's able to hold physical things and can continue to guide Rey so that she can carry on his legacy and the legacy of the Jedi. Finally, the hero gets to live happily ever after. The goal of the myth is to dispel the need for such life ignorance by effecting a reconciliation of the individual consciousness with the universal will. And this is effected through a realization of the true relationship of the passing phenomena of time to the imperishable life that lives and dies in all. In order to be compelling, the myth must end in a satisfying way. For Harry, he is able to live with Ginny and have a family, never having to think Voldemort again. The quote from the book that I like says, "The scar had not pained Harry for 19 years. All was well." Frodo, unable to forget his trauma, travels to the Grey Havens with Bilbo, Gandalf, and the rest of the elves of Middle-earth. And the ship went out into the high sea and passed on into the west, until at last, on a night of rain, Frodo smelled a sweet fragrance on the air and heard the sound of singing that came over the water. And he beheld white shores, and beyond them a far green country under a swift sunrise. Luke inspires the next generation through Rey Skywalker, and he is finally one with the Force with Leia. But why have these stories stayed with us? What makes the hero's journey so compelling that it's the formula that every myth uses? Because the hero's journey is such an incredibly well-rounded arc. The hero must go through self-destruction and become a wholly new person. He has such high highs and low lows. We as an audience are on the edge of our seats the entire time. It may also be compelling because it is so familiar. We return to these stories again and again because we know the structure by heart, so we can be assured that no matter what happens, our hero will be okay. This structure has lived through many years, and we may never know the reason why, but I know this for sure. Even though these stories are similar at its core, it is the outsides that make them interesting. Star Wars was not supposed to be a hit, but because George Lucas used the hero's journey as a base, it gave the audiences of the familiarity that it needed in order for Star Wars to become a success. The monomyth is what makes the movies and books nowadays work. It is in a world of ever-changing technology and shortening attention spans. It helps modern audiences to have a predictable narrative, even if we complain about the narrative being predictable. Writer Sylvia Panon, in her article The Hero's Journey, The Search for Identity from a Psychological, Mythological, and Astrological Perspective, says that the hero's journey reflects what is known as the Greek concept of, I'm going to butcher this word, entelechy, which describes a particular type of motivation, the need for self-determination, inner strength, and the vital force which directs one towards becoming all that one is capable of being. We as everyday people relate to the inner struggles of the heroes. And we all get to go on our own hero's journeys in our lifetime. Journalist Matt Ragland says that it's tempting to only think of adventures in the grand sense and downplay our everyday opportunities to engage with people and places in a new way. This is a mistake. Heeding the call to adventure plays out in numerous little decisions we make to shake up our experience in a positive way. In the end, we must overcome our fear of the unknown and be willing to heed the call. Personally, I loved going back to Hogwarts every year. I'm there with Frodo when he struggles to make it to Mount Doom. I am with Luke every step of the way during his journey learning the ways of the Force. While we have the hero's journey to guide us along, the different worlds is what makes the story compelling, and why I will never forget them. And it's all thanks to Joseph Campbell and his hero's journey. There are my works cited. I hope you enjoyed and have a great summer.